Morning, everybody. Back to feeding small squares for a little bit. Hoopta. It is cold this morning. We've definitely been through a cold snap, which is great. Ground's finally freezing up. Cattle are kind of getting, she's looking thin or sunken in. Cattle are finally kind of starting to get used to the cold weather, but wouldn't you know it, classic Iowa winters. We've got temps coming into the 50s for a couple days here. So I've been getting a week still out of been getting a week out of those 1,800 pound round bales with this small herd of 11 head of dexter. It's time for another round bale, but I've talked about it in my previous videos that a handful of times that we get that thaw and those cows are standing around that bale ring for a week at a time, it really does some ground destruction. So in an effort to try and save my pasture, I'm gonna feed small squares for a few days to get us through those 50-degree temps. And then it drops back down, like way down. Then we get back into single digits during the day and negative double-digit actual temps overnight. So round bales are gonna be a must so they can keep eating as much as they want. And I'll have to keep throwing down some bedding bales into that shed. I'm actually still on my first bedding bale, which now I'm a little worried that I overbought bedding bales because I don't anticipate those ryegrass bales carrying through the next year. I guess worst case scenario, I try and feed them out. I'm also on the fence about if I'm gonna have enough round bales or even really enough hay, because I have been having to feed my small squares earlier in the winter just because we've had those mild temps. Normally I would feed all of my rounds, and then going into March, I'd start throwing out the small squares to get me through, April 15th, April 20th, whenever spring turnout happens. But at the rate that we're going, I'm not gonna have very many small squares left. And when we start getting into these single digit temps, especially, like I said, I barely got a week out of the last couple of round bales. So I have a feeling that when it gets really, really cold and we probably are going to start getting some snow in February, that they're going to be less than a week. Worst case scenario, I throw those ryegrass bales that I know I'm not going to need for bedding anymore in a bale ring and see if I can get them to eat it, but we'll have to see. It was my first year using large rounds for bedding. I've used small bales of oat straw or wheat straw up until this point, but I couldn't justify the cost of those, and I couldn't get my hands on any corn stalk bales. So I tried this ryegrass. Today's January 13th, 14th. I'm still on I haven't even used up my first bale I've opened up, and I've got 7 more. So I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, herd's looking good. They're really sunken in the mornings. Obviously, that's to be expected. You come down first thing in the morning. They really haven't been, especially when it's really cold overnight, they really haven't been up eating throughout the night. So they're hungry. They're not as full. I try not to judge, how they're doing and the amount that they're getting to eat based off of how they look in the mornings. I try and do kind of that mid-afternoon when I come back down to check on them. They're a lot fatter. They're a lot fuller. They're a lot more content. Otherwise, I started throwing out a few range cubes. In the years past, the minute that they got on hay, whether or not it was quality hay, like high quality hay or not, I would throw out the protein lick tubs. It's amazing every year when I'd go through taxes and expenses, it's amazing how much extra those lick tubs added. It was, it's like $1 a pound. So a 50-pound lick tub was like $49 at Tractor Supply. Plus, it's a good source of vitamins and minerals and protein for them, but it's not the most natural thing. But I decided after a couple years ago that the money I spend throwing those lick tubs out right away when they're on hay really is too much, and it's kind of a crutch. And the big thing is obviously that last trimester, those last 3 months of the mama cow's gestation is really when they need protein. It helps their rumen microbes. It helps them balance and process a lot of this dry forage and stay healthy all winter, having that extra protein. But if I had to choose to save money, if I'm going to feed them early on in the winter or later in the winter, you're always going to want to choose later in the winter if you have mama cows, or closer to that calving date, because I think it's 75 or 80% of that fetal growth happens in the last trimester, so the last 3 months of the mama cow's gestation. So she really needs that protein. I have noticed that the manure has been stacking up. Plus, they've really gone through and picked over this pasture for any grass blades left that have any sort of protein or nutrients in them. So I think that also is a factor, that before they were eating the hay, but they were also able to wander around here and pick up little pieces of green grass that were still left just to help balance them out. But that's totally disappeared now. So I'm throwing out range cubes every 2, 3, 4 days just to get me through to the start of the third trimester. And then I'm gonna throw out those protein lick tubs. I'm looking into the sun, but over there is that small field that I plant annuals in. I'm gonna give that one more go this year. I think I'm gonna do all grazing corn, but if it works like it did last year, which is that it didn't really work at all, I think I'm gonna plant that field in alfalfa and start looking into what it would cost to get my own hay equipment or rent my own hay equipment, and how that pencils out compared to the planted annual field. Obviously, not having that field to graze during the grazing season does limit me even more, because it was always nice, even for a few weeks, to put them on that to buy time for some of my cool season pastures. But at the end of the day, really only the finishing animals belong on that field, because it is so small, it doesn't provide me enough grazing. So I still have 3/4 of the herd still out on a cool season pasture. So last thing, website's up and running, both on mobile and on desktop. The desktop is a lot more thorough. The mobile's pretty basic, but I finally got it out there. So if anyone's interested, check us out on the website. It's www.wrockingr.com, and we are still on Instagram, WR_ranch. And yeah, questions, comments, concerns, sarcastic remarks, you know the drill. Leave them down below, and I'll talk to you guys later.